A thread by Carlos Oswita. Carlos responds to a video by Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. Dear white people, no, you are not inherently racist. Carlos responds, Dr. Karlyn Borysenko hits it out of the park again. I had this conversation with my brother, but he wants people to torch the accusers. My own viewpoint is that the crazier this gets, the better it is for Donald Trump. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, but I have a good 20 years of curmudgeonhood on Dr. Karlyn. She's concerned about the well-being of all people, while I myself care only about people of goodwill. So she's a better person than me. I can live with that. This is the book everyone is talking about. White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism by Robin DiAngelo. I hadn't heard of it until I watched Dr. Karlyn's video. Robin DiAngelo protects her account, which makes her pretty fragile herself. On social media, I experienced multiple brigadings, as all the cool kids call it this week. I can't even remember how many groups came after me. Jew haters, Nazis, atheists, anime pud pullers are the only ones that stick in my mind. It didn't bother me in the least. There's a guy whose name I won't use because there are many others with the same name, but he was an Irish psychiatrist. I confirmed that. Oh, let's check out the Irish psychiatrist. Okay. First, he mocked me for my PTSD, and then he mocked me for my parents' suicides in 2013. They denied their advanced cancer, refused to cooperate in their treatment, changed their minds at the last second, and went out in total terror, screaming and thrashing, 6 months apart. It was a hell of a year. I also have Meniere's disease, an incurable affliction exacerbated by stress. So I was having rotational vertigo attacks and projectile vomiting when I wasn't physically wrestling my parents and having the worst nightmares of my life. And a con artist who I'd hired to publicize my book used his George Zimmer voice to make me confide in him. He researched mental illness and Meniere's disease and figured out exactly how to double bill me. The brain fog made me a sitting duck. So, when it was over, both my parents were dead, my book was dead, my career was stillborn, and I was out a huge sum of money. But something happened. I was at least 5 million times stronger than before. Nothing could hurt me. The Irish psychiatrist was like a bad joke. How's your father? He asked. Still dead? No, he recovered. We're having dinner tonight, I responded. He had no response. Then, lend us a shovel. I want to go dig up your father. Dad and I will help, I answered. Now, this guy has a second home in Indonesia. He posted very disturbing images of little girls in provocative poses. Got a little secret? I asked. Guys like you always play chicken with the cops. What would the Irish police think about these photos? Or the London police? Yes, I know where you live in London. I posted his street name, and he blocked me. I suppose most people haven't had horrible lives. To survive a horrible life, you have to be really, really strong. When I say horrible, I mean in the sense of knowing what human eyeball juice tastes like after it sprays into your mouth because of a close-range gunshot. I didn't fire the gun. I was 4 years old. But things never really improved since then. I didn't even know I had PTSD. One day, my resting pulse rate went up to 220 beats per minute. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips and ankles. I stopped drinking and drugging when I was 29, and this happened when I was 44. I went to a cardiologist who gave me every test known to science. He finally suggested psychotropics. I'd never thought about them, but I agreed. After he put me on 2, he said it was time for me to see a psychiatrist. He said that I had the worst PTSD he'd seen in his entire career. Absolutely everything I thought was normal was so abnormal that he couldn't believe I wasn't a criminal. It took 2 years to find the right cocktail, but he also said that I had the strongest will to live that he'd ever seen. That's true. I always felt that maybe, just maybe, I'd achieve peace of mind. And I have. It took agonizing self-examination. I wouldn't actually recommend that people undergo the sort of detective work I did. It leaves you absolutely alone in the world. But solitude is total freedom, and it's a massive source of strength. I understand today's white people not understanding what's going on. Just take solace in the fact that this has all been tried before and it always fails. For now, go along with it and preserve your job. A great piece was written years ago about the current mindset. Australia gets drunk, wakes up in North Atlantic. Tired of being isolated and ignored, continent isn't bloody moving. After an all-night bender during which it kept droning on about how it was always being bloody ignored by the whole bloody world and would bloody well stand to do something about it, Australia this morning woke up to find itself in the middle of the North Atlantic. Good Lord, that was a booze up, said a bleary-eyed Australian Prime Minister, John Howard, speaking from his residence at Kirribilli House, approximately 600 nautical miles east of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. According to Australians and residents of several countries destroyed or lewdly insulted during the continent's nearly 7,000-mile saltwater stagger, the binge began just after noon yesterday at a pub in Brisbane. Recalled witness Kevin Porter. This bloke Martin comes up and says Australia's main problem is that it's stuck in Australia, and everybody says too right. Well, it made sense at the time, Porter added. By 2 a.m., powered by national pride and alcohol, the 3 million square mile landmass was barging eastward through the Coral Sea and crossing into the Central Pacific, leaving a trail of beer cans and Chinese takeaway in its wake. When dawn broke over the northern hemisphere, the continent suddenly found itself not only upside down, but smack in the middle of the Atlantic. And according to most of its 19 million inhabitants, that's the way it's going to stay. We sent troops to Afghanistan. You never hear about it. We have huge government scandals. You never hear about it. It's all America did this and Europe says that, exclaimed Perth resident Paul Watson. Well, we're right in the thick of things now, so let's just see if you can ignore us. Officials on both sides of the Atlantic conceded that it would be difficult. They broke Florida, said U.S. State Department spokesman Richard Boucher. Most of Latin America is missing. It's from satirewire.com, link in the description. I would add two final thoughts. Want to talk about fragile? Try and bring up the killing field of Chicago to Don Lemon, to any black leftist for that matter. Watch the hysteria. Today, Trump had another roundtable meeting with black leaders, his second in 2 days. You can watch them on the White House's YouTube channel. This is why I tell people that the longer the madness goes on, the better it is for Trump. At these roundtables, you can learn a lot. For example, the most disadvantaged black communities are in blue states. Most of the funds went through Democratic politicians. You'll never guess what they did. They blocked funding for black entrepreneurs and diverted the money to white developers, gentrifying the communities for white people. Imagine that. So, Trump changed the rules. Now the money goes directly to black-owned banks and lending organizations, bypassing racist Democrats and their obsession with enslaving black people. Two more things I learned. A black activist told Trump he was the first Republican the man ever voted for, and he said Trump hasn't failed him. He works entirely with prisoners to help them return to society. When he meets his new classes, he asks the question, how many of you are getting out because of Trump's First Step Act? Without fail, 100% of each class raises their hands. Final thing. Trump authorized a program in which the police mentor inmates about to be released. The police learn from the inmates how to be better cops, and with a cop as a mentor, every single one of these people gets jobs when they get out. Even police chiefs are participating. The press won't cover it, but that doesn't matter. At these two roundtables, they all said the same thing. You are the best president black people have ever had. we're going to make it. Final thought. The mass insanity we're seeing is nothing. How about the dancing mania that periodically broke out in Europe for no reason? People danced until they died. The Children's Crusade. Religious leaders riled up people to send their unarmed kids to the Middle East in huge crowds where they all died of disease or were sold into sexual slavery. The Salem witch trials. The American 19th century flying machine sightings. No, they weren't UFOs. They were bizarre contraptions with no visible means of propulsion, with balconies full of people dressed in contemporary clothing, waving and laughing. This was long before rigid airships, dirigibles, had ever flown. Mass hysteria is real. But if you don't let it infect you, everything will be fine. Humor the nutters. Don't get fired for making a principled stand. This is backfiring for Democrats. They own this. Black Lives Matters and Antifa are the old guard, the most fanatical of the foot soldiers. Trump is beaten. He's bled to death. Now, the old guard forward, then on to Brussels. The end.